Hola, mi amigos. Carter here with Juju 1313 Edge Mindset, whatever. We're talking about some lockage. Linerlock versus Framelock. I'm just going to throw this stuff out here. I'm not saying I'm right. These are ideas. These are thoughts that are bouncing around in my head. And I would like your guys' opinion on Framelock versus Linerlock. I do have a lot of experience with these things over the past 10, 15 years. I kind of was a part of the whole Framelock race. And, I don't mean like when it was invented. I know Chris Reeve invented it a long time ago, but I mean when everybody was trying to make the strongest Framelock ever, the thickest Framelock ever, we were talking about, like Linerlock versus Framelock. The biggest thing that we used to talk about with Linerlock versus Framelock was the concept of, this seems so much thinner, but it's actually just as thick as this thinner part. Actually, it's a little bit thicker. And so ergo, this isn't any stronger. And I used to kind of subscribe to that idea. I've since kind of changed that. I don't really think it's that simple. Definitely a cool idea to consider. But there's a lot more involved than just, the thinnest point to the thinnest point, right? And that's what I want to explore in this video. I want to ramble a little bit about frame locks and liner locks. Not getting into any of the newer generation of locks like the ram lock and the access lock and the triad lock and that kind of stuff. Because essentially we've, from a physics engineering standpoint, we have both of these are outdated, equally outdated. They just are. They still have benefit though, like aesthetic benefit, usability benefit, simplicity benefit. But in terms of just lock strength, like let's not kid ourselves. These are both outdated. The frame lock is just, I don't even know if you'd call it an evolution of the liner lock. It's a different implementation of it that's made possible because of titanium and modern machining. But from an engineering standpoint, they're the exact same principle. They do the exact same thing. Whereas more modern locks or, button locks, everything, even though the button lock's been around for a long time, they are completely different locking systems and really put both of these to shame in most ways. Like I said, one of the benefits to these, though, is the simplicity. Simplicity of replacement, simplicity of manufacturing, simplicity of use, less parts, there's no springs. That's the biggest drawback to like ram locks and access locks and button locks is they require springs. And not so much that the spring is going to wear out. Springs last a long time if they're high quality springs. It's more of a corrosion issue, right? My ADD's kicking in. Corrosion issue. So you can put this in pretty bad moist. Yeah, I said moist. Deal with it. You can put these in pretty moist conditions, and you're going to get some rust maybe on some of the hardware if it's not stainless steel. Even if it is stainless steel and it's really bad, you'll get some rust. You'll get some rust on the blade. You can still use the blade. It'll still be sharp. You can clean it up. But the titanium is going to be unaffected. Titanium doesn't really corrode, or at least not in any significant way. And G10 isn't going to corrode. It's going to hold up. It's going to be good. It's going to lock. It's going to continue. Same with this Emerson here, titanium liner on this side, G10. It's not really going to corrode in any significant way. It's going to continue to lock up. But if you take a access lock or a ram lock or a button lock that has a spring, that spring is stainless, but it takes very little corrosion to compromise that spring. Like if you start to get any sort of significant corrosion in that spring, which isn't that hard to do, that spring is going to, it's going to lose its ability to be springy first and foremost, but very quickly it can break, which we've seen on Omega springs, is the biggest kind of example of that. But all springs, are very not prone to corrosion. I don't mean they're going to corrode faster than others, but the consequences of corrosion on the springs is far greater than everything else. So there's that. So there is something to be said for the simplicity of kind of liner locks and frame locks in certain applications. But in terms of engineering strength, those just blow these out of the water. I mean, these are just not that great. By their nature, they are prone to kind of failure, which, honestly, you should never treat a folding knife as anything other than just a slip joint that happens to keep the blade up better for you when you're cutting so it doesn't fall on you. What are we talking about? What am I talking? Okay, liner lock, frame lock. So here's a couple things. that I know to be fairly true and are interesting topics when we talk about these. So what is the number one failure for both these locks? Is it that this titanium compresses or this liner lock compresses down? No. Is it that this is going to snap in half? This is going to break? No. The failure point for both of these knives is lock slip. It's this interface slipping off of the tang. And the reason that happens is by nature, it's set up to be that way. So you've got this, I don't know if I should probably draw would be better, but I don't have paper. This is cut, and I'm going to kind of exaggerate this. So the bottom of this blade here is cut this way. So this way. This is interfacing with that lock. Downward force, if applied this way, is pushing this tang down. And so it's a wedge that's going to want to shoot this thing out. I mean, that's what it wants to do from an engineering standpoint. Shoot this thing out. Now, obviously, you want this tang to be as slight of an angle as you can because that's part of the self-wearing process of this lock bar. You want... Here's a funny thing, too. I'll talk about in a second if I remember. And with the Framelock, a lot of people say, well, you're squeezing it, you're putting force on this. That helps to a certain degree. I mean, if this lock is truly done poorly and it's really just wanting this to slip out with a little bit of force, that's true. But any sort of massive shock to the back of this blade, your hand isn't going to keep it in place. Your hand is too squishy. It has give. I don't care how rock solid your grip is. It has give, and it has enough give that if given enough force, it's still going to kick this thing out. That is where it's going to fail. And the problem with the Framelock is because it's so thick here and it's so stiff, it has little to no flex to it. So it's not going to flex in like that. Or I guess I should I don't know. It's not going to flex in like this. So this is going to want to kick this out. No, the benefit of the titanium on the steel with the no lock bar or the no steel insert is that it's going to stick. And that's actually desirable for lock strength. Is you want that little bit of stick, and you want when this thing gets some force that it's going to increase that stick and actually hold this in place. One of the problems with the lock bar inserts, they last a long time, but they're way more prone to slippage. Same with carbonization, way more prone to slippage. And like I said, back in the day, that was a big deal. People don't seem to care about it as much anymore, kind of. They're still quick to say these are outdated, especially the Linerlock, but then they don't really seem to care that modern implementations of Framelocks are actually more prone to lock failure than something like this. But the benefit of the Linerlock, in accordance to that, is this is thinner, so it has flex. So as you push down on this, it's more likely to bow in and actually push up against this other liner, right? That's kind of how it's designed to work, is as you apply force on this side, this remains engaged, assuming it's, the geometry is correct, and especially with titanium, which is why Emerson chooses titanium for the same sticky properties. Here it's even more important, or at least it has more of an impact. So you actually want this liner to flex in and absorb some of this force. On minor impacts, that's all you'll get, is this will flex. And you'll get a little bit of movement, but it's not going to kick this out. With this, it's either going to hold or it's going to kick it completely off, right? So this is more black and white. Either it's good until it hits a certain point and then it completely fails. This one has more give in terms of it can absorb some shock without it kicking out. Obviously, you're going to get to a point where it might kick out, but ideally, if this is done correctly, this is going to continue to bow in, and it's actually going to change the angle of the lock because this side is going to push up against this liner, and you're going to get a stronger angle here, and you're going to have more force pushing up against this side, if that makes sense, right? So the Linerlock, now, when I say that, I'm not necessarily saying the Linerlock on this knife. There's a lot of things that can affect it. I know Emerson has had some trouble with locks. I mean, from a engineering design standpoint, the Linerlock is way more robust and has way more kind of intrinsic properties to be a strong lock than I think a lot of people realize. And the fact that it is thin is actually what benefits it. Because when you think about it, I know it's easy to say, thick, good, thick, strong, thin, bad, thin, weak. That's an oversimplification. To keep this thing completely engaged, you could do this with a little piece of steel. If it's a short piece of steel And you kind of see that in OTFs, right? If you look at Microtex, they're actually pretty strong in terms of you can hammer them through wood and things. There's only a tiny piece of steel because the shorter the piece of steel is that you're exerting force on, it's not going to bend. It's not going to break, titanium or steel. And liner locks kind of inherently do that as they start to flex in. Now, obviously, geometry's bad. There's grit or oil. Yes, it'll slip off just like anything else. I'm just saying that there's some cool properties with the liner lock that I don't think people realize. And that's part of the reason why it's been used for so long, right? Like if Mr. Walker invented the liner lock like back in the 80s, and it was used widely and still used. And there's a reason for that, because it actually works, and it kind of works in a way that isn't necessarily apparent when you just look at it. And it was kind of a cool, happy accident that he stumbled across this. And actually, the liner lock was invented far before Walker. He just kind of perfected it. He added the detemp ball, did some things to it, made it better. But it's been around for a long time because there's certain qualities with it, mixed with the fact that it's easy to use and cheap to make, that make it still a very robust knife. And I think people unfairly look at these things and say it's thin, so it's got to be bad. When really, if you look at the actual engineering and how it's supposed to function, I don't think that's the case. And at any rate, any folding knife shouldn't be relied on with that lock. So those are the main points I wanted to point out. Like, I don't know, I always kind of hoped that the liner lock would get a resurgence because it is pretty cool how you can have full scales on this side. There's benefits to that. It's pretty cool. I know titanium's fun and neat and stuff, but I just think people see this and think this is inherently just way stronger. No, way stronger. I'm not going to mess with the liner lock when I don't think that's necessarily the truth. Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to the liner lock, and it's kind of cool, very comfortable. Yeah, so that's it for liner lock versus frame lock in terms of the points I wanted to say. But I did want to also say, if we're comparing these two knives, which one do I trust for more to not cut my finger off? It's definitely the Strider, and it's not necessarily because it's a frame lock. Let me get another drink of coffee since nobody's on this video anymore. Not necessarily because it's a frame lock. It's because of this choil. This lock fails. It's depending on where you're holding it, like unless you're clear back here, like, I like that. That's what makes me feel confident, right? It's not necessarily this lock is better than that lock. They're all dangerous. They can all fail, especially when you introduce grime and oil and grit and whatever else. It's the fact that it has this giant choil, and the compromise is that, you reduce your cutting length. Like, this is a decently sized knife, almost as big as this Commander, and yet, look how much more cutting length you get on this Commander here because of this giant choil with this sharpening choil. However, if this lock fails, more than likely you're going to be okay because it's not going to close on your finger. With the Emerson, though, it's cutting you to the bone if it fails. So to me, like, if you're talking about which lock is stronger, that's not what you should be asking. It's, if this lock fails, which one is going to cause the most damage to me? I mean, to me, that's the better question, because any lock can fail. It's if that's your concern, is getting cut and hurt and stuff, the bigger thing is, what protects your hands if this lock fails? You should always kind of treat a knife that it can fail. And so by far, I'm more confident in the Strider just because of that reason, compared to the Emerson, which runs its edge all the way down. I mean, there's just no way that you would ever be safe from completely obliterating your hand if this failed. So, all right, guys, that's it. See, this one too. All of them, right? Because he runs his edge all the way down. So, I mean, I guess if you're even if you're choked all the way up, like, game over, man. You're screwed. It's cutting you to the bone. You're gonna have a really bad day. All right, guys. I'll talk to you guys later. I am out of here. I didn't even talk about my Persian. It's just sitting there pretty. Sitting there like a pretty girl. See you guys later. I'm out. Have a good one.